The world woke up today to a nightmare it never saw coming. A narrow strip of water, the Strait of Hormuz, has just been shut down by Iran. In mere minutes, oil prices soared, markets shook, leaders panicked. But behind the headlines, behind the chaos, lies a deeper truth the world doesn't want you to see. This is not just about ships or sanctions. This is about power, real power, the kind of power the Muslim world has held for centuries, yet has been too divided to claim. Tonight, I'm going to take you inside the painful truth, the truth Muslims must finally confront. What you're about to hear may shake everything you thought you knew. So stay with me, because once this story unfolds, you won't be able to look away. The Strait of Hormuz is a narrow stretch of water, but its significance reaches far beyond its size. Stretching only about 21 miles at its narrowest point, it serves as a critical artery for global energy. Nearly 1/5 of the world's oil passes through this tiny corridor, with tankers carrying millions of barrels each day from the rich oil fields of Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, Iraq, and of course, Iran itself. This fragile passage links the oil-producing Persian Gulf with the vast energy markets of Asia, Europe, and the Americas. Every ship that crosses these waters carries not just fuel, but the weight of global economies, depending on its safe passage. For decades, the world has balanced delicately on the uninterrupted flow of oil through this strait. Any disruption here triggers instant consequences. A delay of even a few days can send oil prices soaring, rattle stock markets, and cause political chaos in capitals thousands of miles away. Insurance premiums for ships skyrocket, investors panic, and governments scramble to secure alternative energy supplies. The Strait of Hormuz is not just a passage of water. It is a pressure point that, if squeezed, can send shock waves across the entire global system. Its geography makes it even more vulnerable. Flanked by Iran on one side and Oman and the UAE on the other, the strait sits under constant watch. Iran, with its powerful naval forces, anti-ship missiles, and thousands of mines, has long reminded the world that it can shut this vital artery if pushed to extremes. The mere threat of closure has often been enough to influence diplomatic negotiations, prevent escalations, or remind adversaries of Iran's leverage. This delicate balance has created a paradox. While the West may impose sanctions, pressure, and threats against Iran, it remains deeply exposed to any action Iran might take in this narrow corridor. The world's superpowers have built a global economy that depends heavily on the steady flow of cheap oil, and much of that oil must pass through these waters controlled by nations they often seek to dominate. Every political decision made in Washington or Brussels regarding sanctions or military action against Iran is weighed carefully against the risk of disrupting this passage. The Strait of Hormuz is not simply a regional issue, it is a global choke point. It reveals a hidden vulnerability in the global economic system, where control over a tiny strip of water can determine the stability of global markets, the price of goods worldwide, and the political survival of leaders far beyond the Middle East. When Iran made the decision to shut the Strait of Hormuz, it wasn't merely flexing military muscle. It was sending a message that echoed around the world. Closing this narrow waterway was not an act of desperation, but a calculated move of immense strategic depth. Iran understood fully that its conventional military might could never match the vast power of the United States or its allies in a direct confrontation. But it also knew that modern warfare isn't always fought with tanks and fighter jets. Sometimes the most devastating weapon is economic pressure, and few places offer as much leverage as the Strait of Hormuz. By holding traffic through this vital passage, Iran didn't need to fire a single missile to trigger global panic. Oil prices surged within hours, markets shook, and governments in far-off nations convened emergency meetings to discuss contingency plans. The world quickly realized how vulnerable it was to the control of this narrow strip of sea. With every ship blocked, billions of dollars were at stake, and the very foundation of energy security in the West was exposed. As fragile and deeply dependent on peaceful cooperation with a country they often sought to punish. The brilliance of this move lies in its simplicity. Iran didn't need to destroy enemy fleets or engage in open warfare to bring the world to the negotiating table. By controlling this key economic artery, it forced powerful nations to reconsider their strategies. Sanctions that once seemed like tools of control were suddenly double-edged swords. Every act of pressure applied against Iran carried the risk of sparking retaliation that could destabilize entire economies overnight. This was not just a regional conflict anymore, it became a global crisis. Iran's leadership knew that while military strength can be measured, economic interdependence is often more powerful. The closure of the strait served as a stark reminder to the world that Iran possesses a form of power that is often underestimated. It's the kind of power that can't be easily sanctioned away or destroyed by drones and bombs. It's the power of geography, of economic leverage, and of the ability to turn global dependence into a weapon. As the international community scrambled for solutions, Iran stood at the center of the storm, watching as world powers who once dismissed its threats now found themselves trapped by their own vulnerability. This move transformed Iran from a nation under siege to a key player, controlling the fate of global markets. The panic that swept across the global markets when Iran shut the Strait of Hormuz exposed a painful truth the West often prefers to ignore. Their economic empires are far more fragile than they appear. For years, Western nations have projected strength, using sanctions, military power, and political influence to shape the world in their image. But beneath this image of control lies a deep dependence on resources, trade routes, and stability in regions they did not fully command. The instant disruption in the strait revealed just how vulnerable these supposedly invincible economies truly are. One decision by a single nation thousands of miles away sent oil prices surging, stock markets trembling, and political leaders into crisis mode. For decades, Western powers have carefully built their global dominance on access to energy resources, much of which flows directly from the Muslim world. The cheap oil that fuels their industries, powers their cities, and drives their economies depends on the uninterrupted flow through these narrow passages. Their vast financial systems, their consumer-driven economies, and their political stability are all silently chained to these vulnerable supply routes. When Iran shut the strait, it wasn't just halting oil tankers. It was exposing the West's Achilles heel. Western leaders know that rising energy prices don't just mean inconvenience, they mean inflation, recession, political instability, and public outrage. The balance of their domestic politics is often tied to economic performance. Fuel prices rise, businesses struggle, unemployment grows, and elections are lost. This is the invisible pressure that Iran's action instantly applied to the very core of Western power. The superpowers that have spent years dictating terms to weaker nations suddenly found themselves vulnerable to forces they cannot easily control. This moment revealed how their global order depends not on true self-sufficiency, but on a fragile web of trade, cooperation, and stability in regions they routinely destabilize. The nations they sanction, occupy, or threaten are often the same ones they rely on to sustain their economic lifelines. This contradiction is the foundation of their hidden vulnerability. The very act of punishing Iran through sanctions and isolation made the world more dependent on uninterrupted oil flows from the Gulf, making any disruption exponentially more dangerous. Iran's shutdown of the Strait of Hormuz served as a mirror, forcing the West to confront its own dependence and exposing the uncomfortable reality that control can quickly become powerlessness when the oppressed refuse to play by the expected rules. This was not simply about oil. It was about revealing who truly holds leverage when the balance of dependence is laid bare. The world often forgets that beyond Iran, the entire Muslim world sits on an ocean of untapped economic power. From the vast oil fields of Saudi Arabia and Iraq to the rich gas reserves of Qatar and the UAE, from the strategic trade routes controlled by Turkey to the mineral wealth scattered across Africa and Central Asia, the Muslim world holds some of the most valuable resources and geographic advantages on the planet. Yet this immense wealth rarely translates into true power or independence because it remains divided, exploited, and controlled by foreign interests. Iran's bold move to shut the Strait of Hormuz serves as a brutal reminder to every Muslim nation of what is possible when even one country asserts control over its own resources and geography. For decades, Muslim nations have signed contracts that favor Western corporations, allowed foreign military bases on their lands, and aligned their economies with global systems designed to extract wealth rather than build self-sufficiency. They've accepted positions as suppliers of raw materials, while the profits, technology, and decision-making remain in the hands of others. This arrangement has created an illusion of wealth while keeping real power firmly outside their grasp. But Iran's action cuts through that illusion, forcing the Muslim world to look at its own potential with new eyes. The ability to influence global markets, destabilize economies, or shift political conversations overnight exists not because of military might, but because of the critical resources flowing from these lands. Yet this power remains dormant, scattered among nations more focused on internal rivalries than collective strength. Iran's willingness to leverage its geography and energy influence is a demonstration of how these resources can be used not simply as commodities, but as tools of sovereignty and negotiation. What the world witnessed with Iran could serve as a model for a far larger awakening if Muslim nations recognized their shared economic interests, coordinated their energy policies, controlled their trade routes, and invested in joint technological development. They could form an economic bloc with the capacity to rival any Western alliance. Their combined oil reserves, natural gas, strategic maritime routes, and growing populations would offer unprecedented leverage over global markets, forcing even the most powerful nations to negotiate from a place of humility rather than dominance. Iran's move is more than a bold act of defiance. It's a glimpse into a future where Muslim economic unity could transform the balance of power globally. The question is whether the rest of the Muslim world will see this opportunity before it slips away once again. The real fear haunting the corridors of Western power isn't just Iran's bold actions, it's the terrifying possibility of what could happen if the entire Muslim world found unity. For centuries, foreign powers have carefully and deliberately sown division among Muslim nations. They have stoked sectarian conflicts between Sunni and Shia, manipulated political rivalries, and propped up regimes that serve their own interests while keeping Muslim nations fragmented and dependent. This division has been the strongest weapon in maintaining control over some of the most resource-rich and strategically important regions on Earth. The painful truth that Muslims must understand is that their weakness has never been a lack of resources, population, or faith. It has always been their division. When Iran shut down the Strait of Hormuz, it showed the world how much power even a single Muslim nation holds when it asserts control over its own destiny. But imagine if that same resolve was matched by the oil giants of the Gulf, the industrial potential of Turkey, the energy reserves of Central Asia, and the growing technological capabilities of Malaysia, Indonesia, and beyond. If united, the Muslim world would control a staggering percentage of the world's energy, trade routes, critical waterways, and human capital. Such unity could instantly shift global alliances, rewrite economic dependencies, and give Muslims control over their own future. Yet instead of unity, Muslim nations remain trapped in cycles of rivalry, often fueled by foreign interests who thrive on keeping the Islamic world fractured. Arms deals, political interference, proxy wars, and economic manipulation continue to drive wedges between nations that share the same faith, history, and struggles. Leaders are often more concerned with protecting their own power than pursuing a vision of collective strength. This deliberate fragmentation prevents the Muslim world from leveraging its full potential and keeps it vulnerable to external exploitation. The West fears not just the individual defiance of Iran, but the inspiration that such defiance might ignite in others. The fear is that one day Muslims across borders might set aside their differences, recognize their shared interests, and build a unified front that controls its own resources, protects its own people, and speaks with one voice on the world stage. That kind of unity would be nearly impossible for foreign powers to manipulate or suppress. It would represent the end of centuries of exploitation and the beginning of true independence. This is the painful truth Muslims must face. Their greatest weakness is not external enemies, but internal division. And only by overcoming that division can they ever realize the full power that has always been within their grasp. Iran's decision to shut the Strait of Hormuz is not only a political and military statement, it is a powerful symbol meant to awaken the Muslim world. For too long, Muslim nations have watched as their resources were extracted, their lands were occupied, and their sovereignty was manipulated by foreign powers. Many have grown numb to the constant interference, distracted by internal conflicts and rivalries. But moments like this shake the consciousness of the entire Muslim world. They force Muslims everywhere to reflect on the immense strength they hold and the wasted potential that lies dormant because of their own divisions. Iran's bold action serves as a mirror, reflecting both the tremendous power that exists and the painful reality that this power remains unclaimed by the wider Ummah. When one Muslim nation stands firm, it demonstrates a truth that is often buried under fear and propaganda, that the real power is not in submitting to foreign dictates, but in controlling one's own destiny. The Muslim world holds not only vast natural resources, but also a shared history, culture, and spiritual foundation that, if united, could build a civilization capable of rivaling any on earth. The issue has never been about lacking capability. It has always been about lacking unity and vision. Iran's defiance becomes a test not just for itself, but for all Muslims who observe from the sidelines. It asks a difficult question. Will you continue to be divided and manipulated, or will you rise and reclaim what is rightfully yours? The awakening this moment offers is not about supporting one government or another. It is about recognizing that the chains which have held the Muslim world down for generations are not unbreakable. They have been maintained by choices. Choices to stay silent, to stay divided, and to accept foreign interference as a permanent reality. Iran's move shatters the illusion that these conditions are unchangeable. Whereas it shows that courage, even from one corner of the Muslim world, can shake the very foundations of global power structures. The world waits to see if this act will remain an isolated event or spark a broader awakening. The real power of the Muslim world lies not just in oil or geography, but in its people realizing their collective strength. If that awakening happens, it will not only reshape global politics, but redefine the future of over 1 billion Muslims. The painful truth is clear, but so is the opportunity for transformation. And now the world watches, breathless. One nation, by closing a narrow stretch of water, has exposed the deepest cracks in the global order. Iran's decision to shut the Strait of Hormuz was more than a response to pressure. It was a bold declaration that power does not belong solely to those who claim it through might, but to those who dare to rise when the world expects them to fall. The Western world, with its powerful economies and mighty armies, has been forced to confront a truth it long tried to hide. Its wealth and stability rest upon the fragile resources of others, and those others, the Muslim world, have yet to fully awaken to the power that lies beneath their own feet. But this story is bigger than Iran. It is a mirror held up to every Muslim nation, every leader, and every believer. The resources are there, the geography is there, the people are there. What has been missing is unity, vision, and the courage to stand as one. The painful truth Muslims must understand is this: no foreign power can dominate a people who refuse to be divided. The day the Muslim world wakes up to its collective strength is the day the global balance of power will shift forever. To everyone who stayed with me till this moment, may you carry these lessons with clarity. May you rise with wisdom, walk with dignity, and never forget the strength that lives within unity. Thank you for listening. May God bless you all. Good luck on your journey. The world may have witnessed a single bold move, the shutting of the Strait of Hormuz, but what it revealed is far greater than any one act. It exposed a system built on fragile foundations, a global order that has long depended on the division and submission of the Muslim world. Iran's defiance was not just about oil or trade routes. It was a message to every Muslim heart across the globe. You have more power than you've been led to believe. The painful truth is that the greatest weapon used against the Muslim world has never been bombs or sanctions. It has been division. But unity remains the key that can unlock a future of dignity, independence, and true power. The time for awakening is here. The question is no longer what the West fears, but whether Muslims will recognize their own strength before it's too late. Because when unity is forged, when hearts align beyond borders, no force on this earth can stop what will rise. To everyone who stood with me through this journey, may these words plant a seed of reflection in your heart. May you walk forward with wisdom, with courage, and with eyes wide open to the truth. Thank you for watching. May God bless you all, and good luck.